Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Sean Dobbs, and I'm going to be talking in this episode about creativity, which is quite a broad subject and topic area, and obviously quite complex. But I'm going to try and simplify it, and I suppose dive into it and dive into some of the understanding or misunderstanding with it, which leads to the complexity or leads to some of the problems around it. So I was going to call this episode uh, Kids Aren't Creative, but I thought there'd be a massive uproar about that, so I might maybe name it something else. But my point with that is that um, when it comes to uh, when it comes to invention and when it comes to developing something and problem solving, kids are expected, and even adults too. Actually, if you don't learn as a kid, you won't have it as an adult. But kids are expected to be inventive and um, problem solvers and leaders, and they're expected to be all these things. But the reality is, all those things need to be taught, and all those skills need to be learned. There's kind of this I don't know where it really comes from, but there's this kind of thing that kids are naturally inventive. They're actually, for me, they're not. I have a number of kids myself, and kids are amazing. They're I love watching my kids learn and experiment and do different things. But I wouldn't say that they're. I suppose it's quite a tricky one to. This is where the trickiness comes from, the complexity come from. What is creativity? You know, if a child or a young person or an adult or whoever comes up with something, and you could say anything is creative. So, but it's probably better if you apply the analogy in another way. So, for example, if I give a child or again somebody who's never handled a musical instrument before, and I hand it to them and tell them just to play something, come up with something, they'll come up with something. They'll experiment. They'll give it a go, but they don't know how to play the musical instrument. They've never played it before. They've never seen it before. Um, they don't know how to compose music. They don't have a musical ear. They haven't been trained to, distinguish between notes and how to transition between notes and how to harmonize. They don't have that whole skill set. So you're handing them this object, this task, this challenge, and you're expecting them to be able to do it. So, an analogy of music, people would know that's not going to work if you hand a 2-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old child a musical instrument. They can come up with something and strum, and you could say they're being creative. They are being creative, but they're not playing music as we know music. So, and the same is true for painting and for art. Again, regardless of age, really, if someone hasn't, even young adults, any age, or older adults, myself maybe, if someone handed me a paintbrush and colors and everything else, I have a little bit of frame of reference maybe, so that's a little bit of advantage. But I'm definitely not an artist or artistic. Um, I don't understand. Do I use oil paints on canvas or can I use them on paper? I don't know the rules of art. So my point is that all of the other creative aspects of life, such as music, such as art, are no different to the creative aspect of designing new products or coming up with solutions or inventing. So just as you can't expect to hand a child a musical instrument or a paintbrush and expect them to paint the Mona Lisa, you can't give a child, or a young adult, a challenge and expect them to be creative, come up with them with a really inventive solution because they haven't been taught the rules. So I think this is part of uh, the whole misunderstanding with creativity. The whole thing with creativity and invention is that this whole saying you have to think outside the box. Thinking outside the box isn't really a good analogy because thinking outside the box actually means free thinking, but you have to free think within confines. You have to set parameters. So just as you're painting, if you want to stick with the painting analogy, just as you create a painting, you have to know what is it I'm painting. You have to pick something. You can't just start putting random colors together, start painting one thing, then change halfway through, switch, between oil paints and water-based paints, and you can't do that. That's not so. There has to be certain things that are set. So with the art of creation, any form of creation, there has to be parameters that are set. So you have to decide, I'm I'm making a certain type of machine. It has to be within this budget. It has to be a certain size. It has to work in this way. It's going to be made with certain kinds of materials. And those materials kind of come before or after the creation process. Maybe the creation process, you have to figure out what kind of materials is right. But basically, what I'm trying to say is that there has to be some confines, and you have to understand the interplay between those things, just as you have to understand the interplay between different types of paint and different kinds of colors, and how different colors interplay with each other, and how you have to build up the layers. So what I'm trying to say is that in terms of music and art, for most people it seems obvious and understandable that you can't just hand a child that challenge, hand the child all the equipment they need, but not the knowledge on how to execute it and the skill. And people appreciate that in terms of those other aspects of the creative aspects that they have to be taught. I understand that my child needs to be taught music. I understand I have to learn how to play the guitar before I can play music. People seem to grasp that much better than they do when it comes to creating products or problem solving. And some of I know a number of people that are educators, and they tell me how they set people in their class, children, challenges, problem solving challenges, or opportunities to be inventive. And they always say, I give them a challenge. They all copy each other. One person comes up with a solution, and they all copy it. But I say, how have you taught them? What have you? How have you taught them to be inventive? What have you done to teach them how to be a problem solver? Or have you taught them to see? There's a quantum physicist, and he says that objects are possibilities, and objects are possibilities. One object can be many, many things, but you have to see it with a fresh perspective. You have to be taught to see things not for what they are right now, but for what they could be. And that sounds a bit philosophical, and it sounds a bit airy fairy, but it's not really. You have to understand things at their core principles, see them for what they are, and understand how they can be, reapplied in different domains and in different ways. And likewise, if you need something to solve a problem, the chances are it already probably exists in some fashion somewhere else, and it can quickly be taken from there and reapplied. But to understand that and to appreciate and to know that takes a lot of research, takes a lot of knowledge, takes a lot of gathering that information and building it up. So the way I put that a number of years back, I compiled a bit of a document where I sort of talked about in my earlier childhood, I wanted to be an inventor. I wanted to be a wacky inventor. I wanted to invent things and come up with things and design new things. And I was lucky that, you know, schools aren't creative, and schools don't teach creativity as much as they try to, they just don't. I was very lucky in my home life. I was exposed to a lot of, really creative people who had a real engineering mindset and designed things and took old machines, stripped them down, rebuilt them, turned them into new exciting things, which for me was, as a child, it's like a transformer. It was magical for me. It was absolutely fantastic, and it gave me that appreciation that, because something is something right now doesn't mean it can't become something else, and that you can't take, I understood then that you can take multiple different bits of different equipment and machines and combine them together to make something new, to make a new machine or a new part to be used as something else. So that gave me that whole fresh perspective. But I needed to see that, and I wasn't taught that in school, and to my knowledge, no one is taught that in school. And it's not just late schools, but that's I suppose the reality of the fact. So I don't know why people expect kids or even adults to be inventive and to be creative, because it's not easy. It's easy to come up with crazy brush strokes on the page. It's easy to strum random notes in no order. It's easy to come up with wacky, harebrained ideas that don't really work and don't amount to anything. That's all the same. So, and likewise, it's the same that you have to be taught. You have to be taught creativity, because creativity does have rules, like music, like art, everything. It does have rules. But the issue is that a lot of who go into people who go into product development will say go through the engineering route, and a lot of those go from school right through obviously into college and to university. And that whole process, engineers are taught to be very meticulous and process driven and follow the rules and physics and maths and ABC. And there's, it's very process driven, it's very routine, it's very regimented, and it's very analytical, which is, it has to be. It has to be that. That's what engineering is. But invention is a mixture of that mixed with the creative side. And the creative side, I'm gonna have to explain in another video because it's a whole other thing. But it's a real combination of both those things. Invention can't be one thing. It can't be the crazy mad brushstrokes, on the page or the random notes. It has to be the formulated, thought out, the what am I building, why am I building it, where am I building it for, how much am I building it for, what size does it have to be, what job does it have to be. So that's a new box. That's not thinking outside the box. That's thinking inside new boxes, as the term goes. So you're creating a new box, a new range of parameters which you have to achieve, which your invention or your creation or your product has to achieve. It has to, tick certain boxes. It has to work within certain confines. But once you, define those parameters, then you're free. So that's where the free thinking comes in. So we'll not call it thinking outside the box, because thinking outside the box is just going off. You've got no constraints at all. You've no parameters at all. So that can be quite confusing. So it's better to think of it, like I say, as thinking inside new boxes. But once you have set your parameters, you can solve those. As long as you hit those parameters, you can hit them in any way. With any combination of things or with any type of creative solution that you come up with. As long as it ticks all those boxes, it doesn't really matter. Well, to a degree, it doesn't really matter what it looks like. So as long as it does that, and it does it in the most simple and efficient way possible. So there's a big piece there, I suppose, around teaching creativity, but also for people to realize creativity can be taught, but it takes a long time, or at least it took me a long time. And what I started to say earlier was that I created a slide deck a couple of years back where I talked about me growing up and wanting to be inventive and wanting to invent things and wanting to do things. But every time I want to come up with something, I didn't have any ideas. I didn't have any perspective on things. I didn't have any unique idea. All I knew how to do was to copy all the things I saw before, which was me just remaking things. That wasn't really inventive for me, and it wasn't any step forward, and it wasn't what I was trying to achieve. So I realized at quite a young age that the way to be inventive is to build up what I call my constellation. So, if you have one idea or one point of reference or one thing to draw inspiration from, then you're not going to build anything or do anything. You're going to, like I say, keep building the same things. But what you have to do is, what I done was build inspiration from multiple different things. Studied everything I saw, from machines to animals, nature, literally everything I saw. I automatic reverse engineered it, try and understand how it works, why it works that way, why wouldn't it work another way. Really go back and forward through it, and in that I built up more and more information, more and more understanding and comprehension of different mechanisms, how they work together, how they interact together. How nature does it, how nature solves problems, which is you can draw inspiration from that and apply it into inventions and creativity, which is called biomimicry, which is fantastic. I absolutely love that. Nature is the most efficient problem solver. So that's, I suppose, that has to happen for creativity to happen and come about, and for people, kids, adults, to be able to solve problems. It's not enough just to have an engineering degree, because that people in that sort of more process, like I say, driven, area are nearly too analytical and too regimented to let loose, to let the crazy side loose, and let the creativity come back into the play. So it's very important to understand that, I suppose, and it's very important to let the craziness out. But to let that creative side out, you have to have something there. You have to have frames of reference. You have to have knowledge. You have to have an understanding of all those other complex things. So creativity isn't just crazy ideas. People say it's crazy ideas, and I jokingly say it's crazy ideas, but it's not crazy ideas. It's lots of existing ideas and lots of existing concepts and lots of existing mechanisms. And um, concepts from other areas that I'm trying to take together and join in a new way. So I'm not actually, I've invented multiple different things, and um, but I've only ever done that by combining existing things I've known, but I've combined them in a new way. But if I didn't know each of the one of those points or each of those things, I wouldn't be able to combine them. I wouldn't be able to have come up with what I came up with. So I had to have already done my research. I had to already have that knowledge in my head and have those um, frames of reference and ideas and previous examples to join together to make new things. So the fundamental or the takeaway point here is that creativity doesn't exist. Creativity does exist, but like in an inventive way and in a way that can be turned into something really conducive, something really magical, something like a new product or something really beneficial. It takes a lot of learning and it has to be taught. There's a guy, Ken Robinson, created a TED talk a number of years back saying that schools kill creativity. At the time, I listened to it and I loved the talk, still a great talk. But I suppose I don't fully agree with that. I do agree with the core thing in it, but I don't think schools definitely don't set out to kill creativity. And I don't know if kill creativity is the right word, but they definitely don't develop it and they don't grow it and they don't encourage it. They grow, focus, and develop multiple other aspects, maths, English, science, all the things that are critically important as well to all of this picture that I'm talking about, to creativity, but they really neglect all the other things. And the main thing kids have that give them the magic, which people call them creative, the main thing they have is they lack ambition. So they'll do anything. They don't care. They'll go to the shop in a pirate outfit. They'll do wacky stuff. They'll come up with crazy ideas. They'll try stuff because they don't know if it'll work or not. And even if they kind of know it won't work, they don't really care. They just want to try it. So that's one of the main things that gives kids the potential to come up with creative things or inventive things. Um, and the second thing is that basically they're curious. They're curious, and their curiosity leads them to examine and try new things and play with different scenarios and play. Basically, that's what invention is. So they have two amazing building blocks, which everyone still has, but it's just most people, squash those, or that kind of becomes squashed, which is maybe Ken's Robinson's point with school, is that maybe school helps to squash those. Unfortunately, it's maybe not school's intention, but indirectly that's what happens. So those are the two fundamental things that help. Another big thing with creativity that maybe some kids have, but or maybe they don't have, is grit. So that's you need those sort of those three things combined to really lead to coming up with creative solutions in the future or inventive solutions in the future. But those things lead to the build up of the knowledge, which then will lead to the inventive solutions. So it's not possible to come up with inventive solutions when you're 5 or 6, or you may come up with some little solutions, but to really come up with game changing things. So that's me wrapped up this episode. So I just want to kind of talk over that. So as always, welcome any comments and thanks, and please feel free to subscribe to my channel.